The Euphrates has been the cradle of civilization in West Asia. The river has been the lifeline for millions in Iraq and Syria.
The geographical region, commonly referred to as Mesopotamia, or the land between two rivers, is demarcated by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which have played a pivotal role in shaping the area's rich historical legacy. Throughout history, this particular geographic region has served as the cradle of numerous illustrious civilizations, such as the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians, being among the most prominent. While the Euphrates and Tigris rivers may not rival the grandeur of the Nile or the renowned waterways, they are responsible for shaping the renowned Fertile Crescent, which served as the birthplace of what may have been humanity's earliest established societies. But it is in danger now, as it has dried up and something shocking has been revealed. Want to know what? Continue watching what is happening. Many of these ancient cities' remnants can be found close to the banks of rivers like the Euphrates and the Tigris. The biblical city of Nineveh is located not far from the city of Mosul, which has been receiving a lot of media attention recently. Many of the region's cultural and historical references, like this Persian adage, refer to the region's rivers. Charity given in the Tigris will be returned to the giver by God in the desert. That what goes around comes around is a pretty good approximation of this proverb, according to UT, Austin's Persian Online. Abraham's presumed birthplace, the kingdom of Akkad, left an indelible effect on the world, and several cities along the Euphrates and Tigris have been continually inhabited for more than 3,000 years. Wheat and other crop harvests do well in the soil around those rivers, which has contributed to the success of these settlements. The Taurus Mountains in southeastern Turkey are the source of the waters that eventually become the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. From there, they branch off and go south through the deserts of Syria and Iraq, eventually meeting up again and joining the tributaries that originate in Iran to form the Persian Gulf. The length of the Euphrates River is 1,740 miles, while the length of the Tigris is just 1,150 miles. Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran are the nations that border the Tigris and Euphrates River basin, which is roughly about 13,700 square miles in size. They are considered riparian because of their location on the banks of these rivers. Although Turkey is the primary provider of the rivers, all of the riparian countries contribute significantly to the water supply. The mean annual discharge of the Euphrates is roughly 32 billion cubic meters, with Turkey contributing 90% and Syria 10%. Nearly 52 billion cubic meters of water flows down the Tigris River each year, with 51% of that coming from Iraq, 40% from Turkey, and 9% from Iran. Nearly 58%, or 49 BCM, of the 84 BCM yearly discharge of the two rivers comes from Turkey. The marshes are dying off once more. Around this time 3 years ago, the huge marshlands that make up the province of Dhikar in southern Iraq were in full bloom. While fishermen navigated wide stretches of calm water in punts between vast reed beds, buffalo bathed amid the verdant flora. But in today's world, those wetland areas, which were once a significant portion of the enormous Mesopotamian marshes, have been reduced to a series of thin channels of dirty water bordered by dry, cracked ground. Hundreds of dried-out fish and the rotting remains of water buffalo that had been killed by the salty water can be found littering the stream banks. As a result of the drought, tens of thousands of hectares of farms and orchards have become infertile, and farmers are leaving their land, causing villages to empty. The Mesopotamian marshes, which historically covered between 15,000 and 20,000 square kilometers on the floodplain of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, were designated as UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2016 by the United Nations. This honor was bestowed upon the marshes in recognition of its cultural and biological value. The marshes made up one of the world's largest inland delta systems. They were a surprising oasis in an extremely hot and dry environment. They were home to 22 species that were threatened with extinction on a worldwide scale. But at this time, this ecosystem, which consists of alluvial salt marshes, swamps, and freshwater lakes, is in the process of disintegrating as a result of a confluence of forces related to the weather, the water supply, and the government. The size of the rivers is decreasing at an alarming rate, and the agricultural land that was previously home to bountiful harvests of barley and wheat, pomegranates, and dates is being eroded. The environmental catastrophe is hurting wildlife and is forcing tens of thousands of marsh Arabs, who have lived in this region for the past 5,000 years, to look for employment in other parts of the world. The experts warn that unless radical action is taken to ensure the region receives adequate water and better manages what remains, the marshlands in the southern part of Iraq will vanish. This will have far-reaching implications for the entire country, as farmers and pastoralists will leave their land for the already crowded urban areas, and the loss of production will lead to an increase in the cost of food. In common parlance, the Mesopotamian marshlands are referred to as the cradle of civilization. This is because anthropologists are of the opinion that this is the location where humankind, approximately 12,000 years ago, began its massive transformation from a lifestyle of hunting and gathering to one of cultivation and settlement. The region, which is comprised of 4 distinct marshes, has historically been home to a diverse range of fish and fauna. It provides a winter refuge for migrating birds and supports a productive shrimp and finfish fishery. However, Saddam Hussein began a deliberate campaign to destroy the marshes in the early 1990s. He bombed them and drained them to expel marsh Arabs who had participated in uprisings against his rule and to punish them for their actions. In the end, the Iraqi president's initiative was successful in cutting the amount of water in the marsh by 90%. A later United Nations implemented rehydration project claimed to recover surface water and vegetation to 58% of the marsh's original area by 2006. After the Iraq War, the new government and marsh Arabs began to remove embankments and drainage works. Wildlife began to make a comeback, and by 2020, when the post-Saddam rebound was at its height, some 250,000 marsh Arabs had returned to their homeland to restart fishing, reed harvesting, crop cultivation, and the herding of water buffalo, among other activities. These environmental achievements are once again in jeopardy as Iraq approaches its 4th year of drought, as the marshlands and their surrounding buffer zones already cover approximately 4,000 square kilometers. On the rivers that provide practically all of Iraq's water, new dams and diversions are continuing to proliferate upstream in Turkey and Iran. But there is little coordination or international cooperation taking place as this development occurs. The Iraqi government said in July of last year that the country's water supplies has decreased by 60% from the previous year. Because of the low water levels, large swaths of the marshland have become completely dry. Farmers won't plant if they don't have access to water for irrigation. Without roots to hold the soil in place, the risk of desertification increases. The situation in the marshes now is worse than when Saddam was trying to destroy them, says Haider A. al-Thamiri, a professor of water resources engineering at the University of Baghdad, works with the government's Center for Restoration of Iraqi Marshes and Wetlands. The situation in the marshes now is worse than when Saddam was trying to destroy them, says al-Thamiri. This is because water continued to flow from Iran into the Huwayza marshes in eastern Iraq throughout that time period, thereby maintaining the vitality of at least one section of the system. However, since Iran finished building a 56-kilometer-long weir along its border with Iraq in 2009, there is no longer any water that flows into the Huwayza when there is a drought. Now, all of the wetlands, according to al-Thamiri, are suffering very badly. The quality of the water that is still available is negatively impacted when river flows are low. More than 24,000 hectares of agricultural land and 30,000 trees have been lost as a result of seawater intrusion today, which can be traced back to the Persian Gulf and extends upstream for 189 kilometers. Pollutants from agriculture, the oil and gas industry, and sewage have become increasingly concentrated as a result of a lack of inundation of fresh water. The effects of climate change, which include decreased rainfall, recent years in Iraq have witnessed record low rainfall, and rising temperatures, which accelerate the evaporation of water from reservoirs and streams, are, of course, making the situation worse. Iraq is ranked as the 5th most vulnerable country in the world to the effects of climate change by the United Nations Environment Program. According to Salah El-Haj Hassan, the representative for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in Iraq, over the course of the past couple of years, there has consistently been less rain, less water, less productivity from the land, and an increasing number of dust storms. Ineffective management contributes to the problem as well. The water infrastructure in Iraq has not been adequately maintained or improved. Ditches and canals that are not lined allow water to seep into the ground, and power outages make it difficult to pump and store water. Farmers frequently flood their crops in order to irrigate them, rather than employing methods of watering that are more efficient and targeted. Additionally, communities frequently dig illegal wells and divert water from rivers that are shared. The falling water levels have caused widespread agricultural losses, making it harder for millions of people in Iraq to provide food for their families. The nonprofit Norwegian Refugee Council conducted a study of households in the provinces of Anbar, Basra, Dohuk, Kirkuk, and Nineveh last summer. The poll found that 1/4 of respondents in the marshlands and beyond had upwards of 90% wheat crop failure due to a shortage of water. In the poll, 1 out of every 3 households decreased the amount of land they farmed, and 42% of households reported a decrease in the amount of barley, fruit, and vegetables they produced compared to the previous cropping season. According to El Haj Hassan of the FAO, more than 2,000 households were compelled to leave their houses due to the retreating marshlands between the beginning of the summer last year and the end of the month of October. Others have abandoned their traditional way of life and gone to places such as Basra or Baghdad, while others have moved to parts of marshland that still have water as a source of water. Some of the displaced have moved to areas of marshland that still have water. Experts in the field of national security think that a lack of water, and more especially the elimination of marshlands, could have a negative impact on the country's safety. Tensions are building among the people who still live in the marshes. A former risk analyst for G4S Consulting named Aymar Hennessy stated that the thousands of people that have been uprooted and impoverished by the ongoing crisis in the Mesopotamian marshes are likely to be more susceptible to recruitment by non-state actors, such as militias and terrorist groups that make promises of an attractive future. According to Nature Iraq, the recent drying of the marshes has resulted in a collapse in the diversity of species, with numbers of binni, a fish with a brownish gold coloration that is highly desired by marsh Arabs, plunging. 2,000 officially registered fishermen have lost their source of income and are now unemployed, Saleh Hadi, the director of agriculture for DCAR, remarked in October. Before the drought, it seemed as though the endangered Basra reed warbler and the native Iraq babbler were both doing well in the marshes. The marbled teal duck, which is considered to be in a near-threatened status by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, was also doing well. However, Nature Iraq reported that sightings of these birds have become far more uncommon as a result of falling water levels. Even animals are being affected by this. The water buffalo that graze in the rivers are having a difficult time getting clean water and enough food. As a result, thousands of them have perished as a result of disease and hunger. Sama Hadid, a spokesperson for the NRC, stated that the lower water levels are having a catastrophic impact on the buffalo farmers. The lower water levels are having a devastating impact on the buffalo farmers. The buffalo breeders that we are talking to are getting more and more desperate as the conversation continues. NGOs are pushing steps that could decrease the impact of drought, including investment in water filtering and treatment systems for places with high salination levels. The future for communities in Iraq's marshlands is deteriorating. Therefore, these actions are becoming increasingly important. They are putting pressure on Iraqi officials, both at the national and regional levels, to gather more data on water flows and on the implications of shortage, as well as to enhance the regulation of aquifers to prevent overpumping, which reduces the amount and quality of groundwater. This is happening because overpumping is a problem in Iraq. The Iraqi government is providing some grain farmers with wheat that is resistant to salt. Breeders are working on sugar beets that are resistant to drought. And academics are lobbying for programs that offer conflict management training to communities who are struggling to share water resources equitably. Iraq has been in negotiations with its upstream neighbors for years, in an attempt to allow more water to flow across its border. Nevertheless, the situation has not improved during this time. Iraq made the announcement that it would take Iran to the International Court of Justice for blocking its access to water in January 2022. However, the matter has not moved forward since then. In July of last year, Iraq submitted a request to Turkey requesting that Turkey increase the amount of water that flows into Iraq from the south. It was agreed upon by both parties that a technical delegation from Iraq would travel to Turkey in order to assess the water levels behind the dams in Turkey. Nevertheless, Turkey did not assume responsibility for Iraq's water limitations. Instead, Turkey's ambassador to Iraq, Ali Reza Guni, accused the Iraqi people of squandering their water resources and urged the country to improve its irrigation systems and limit the amount of water that is wasted. According to projections made by the World Food Program of the United Nations and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the region will have below-average rainfall in the new year. The repercussions of climate change are expected to grow, and there is no sign that improvements in water management are on the horizon. Thus, the future of Iraq's Mesopotamian marshes and the communities that depend on them appears to be dismal. Discovering what's beneath the Euphrates. A miracle. As the water levels plummeted this year due to the unprecedented drought in the country, the settlement in northern Iraq that includes the Mosul Dam, formerly known as Saddam Dam, emerged from the reservoir. The city, found by German and Kurdish archaeologists, was located on the Tigris River during the time of the Mitanni Empire, the University of Freiburg announced in a statement. Biblical events took place in the area between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which is known as Mesopotamia. In addition, the university stated, the extensive city with a palace and several large buildings could be ancient Zakiku, believed to have been an important center in the Mitanni Empire. According to the university, Iraq is one of the countries in the world most affected by climate change, and since December, large amounts of water have been drawn down from the Mosul Reservoir, Iraq's most important water storage, to prevent crops from drying out. This caused the water level in the reservoir to decrease, revealing the Bronze Age metropolis that had been hidden for decades. There have never been any prior archaeological digs there. According to the university's announcement, the ancient city was found in the Kemyun archaeological site in Iraq's Kurdistan region, which had previously been uncovered in 2013 when reservoir water levels plummeted for the first time. This time, though, the archaeologists couldn't afford to waste any time in excavating and cataloging the new site before it was inevitably submerged once more. In January and February of 2022, the Directorate of Antiquities and Heritage in Dohuk collaborated with Kurdish archaeologist Hassan Ahmed Qasim, chairman of the Kurdistan Archaeology Organization, and German archaeologists Ivana Puljic of the University of Freiburg and Peter Falsner of the University of Tübingen to conduct excavations. The Fritz Thyssen Foundation, through the University of Freiburg, provided emergency money, and a team was assembled in a couple of days. A statement from the university said, "The German Kurdish archaeological team was under immense time pressure because it was not clear when the water in the reservoir would rise again." In addition to the palace, which had been partially documented in 2018, the researchers were able to map the city and identify numerous additional big buildings, including a gigantic stronghold with walls and towers. Archaeologists uncovered an industrial complex and a multi-story storage facility. According to the school, the extensive urban complex dates to the time of the Empire of Mitanni, approximately 1550 to 1350 BC, which controlled large parts of northern Mesopotamia and Syria. To paraphrase what Puljic remarked, the huge magazine building is of particular importance because enormous quantities of goods must have been stored in it, probably brought from all over the region. To quote Qasim, the excavation results show that the site was an important center in the Mitanni Empire. Despite being constructed of sun-dried mud bricks and having been submerged for more than 40 years, the walls were surprisingly well preserved, sometimes reaching heights of several meters, surprising the researchers. The university stated, This good preservation is because the city was destroyed in an earthquake around 1350 BC, during which the collapsing upper parts of the walls buried the buildings. Shortly after the earthquake struck, the researchers discovered many antiquities, including more than 100 cuneiform tablets from the Middle Assyrian period. The team behind the find is crossing its fingers that it may lead to new insights into the city's ultimate fate and the origins of the Assyrians' ascent to power in the region. According to Falsner, it is close to a miracle that cuneiform tablets made of unfired clay survived for so many decades underwater. To protect the structures they had excavated from the inevitable return of the water, the researchers had covered them with plastic sheets and gravel. According to the school, the area is once again underwater. Did you know that the Euphrates River is mentioned in both the book of Genesis and the book of Revelation? Genesis and Revelation are the earliest and last books of the Bible. This river is mentioned more than 50 times in the Bible. It is a geographical reference that is mentioned as being there at both the beginning and the end of the world in the Bible. One of the 4 rivers that were mentioned in Genesis 2 as having poured out of the Garden of Eden was the Euphrates River. God makes a promise to give the Israelites all of the country that is between the Euphrates and the Mediterranean Sea in the first chapter of Deuteronomy. In chapter 8 of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah used the Euphrates River as a metaphor for the Assyrian Empire, which was a potential aggressor against Israel. In addition, chapter 16 of Revelation talks of the Euphrates River becoming completely dry in advance of the Battle of Armageddon. In general, the Euphrates River is an important geographical and metaphorical feature throughout the Bible, and it still has a part to play in God's plan. This is because the Euphrates River flows through ancient Mesopotamia. The top verses in the Bible that talk about the Euphrates River include Revelation 16:12. In order to clear the path for the kings who would come from the east, the 6th angel poured out the contents of his bowl upon the huge river Euphrates, causing its water to evaporate. In Revelation chapter 9 verse 14, the voice of God is heard saying to the 6th angel who was holding the trumpet, "Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." In Genesis 15:18, the Lord makes a covenant with Abram, saying, "To your offspring I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates." On that day, the Lord makes the covenant with Abram. Genesis 2:10-14. There was a river that ran out of Eden to water the garden, and at that point, the river split into 4 separate rivers. The first one is known by its Greek name, the Pishon. It is the river that wound its way around the entirety of Havilah, the area where gold was found. Additionally, the gold from that region is of high quality, and it also contains bdellium and onyx stone. The Gihon is the name of the second river that we will discuss. It was the river that wound its way around the entirety of Cush's territory. The Tigris is the name of the third river, and it is the one that flows to the east of Assyria. And the Euphrates is the 4th river on the list. Kings 23:29. Pharaoh Necho, the monarch of Egypt, traveled to the Euphrates River region to lend assistance to the king of Assyria during the reign of Josiah. At Megiddo, King Josiah made his way out to meet Necho in combat, but Necho was there waiting for him and ended up killing him. Kings 24:7. Because the king of Babylon had captured all of his realms, the king of Egypt did not march out from his own nation again. The king of Babylon's conquests extended from the Wadi of Egypt to the Euphrates River. Samuel 8:3. In addition to this, David was successful in defeating Hadadezer, son of Rehob, the king of Zobah, when the latter attempted to repair David's statue near the Euphrates River. Deuteronomy 1:7. Break camp and go forward into the hill country of the Amorites. Go to all of the nearby peoples in the Arabah, in the highlands, in the western foothills, in the Negev, and along the coast. Go to the land of the Canaanites and to Lebanon. Travel as far as the large river, the Euphrates. Deuteronomy 11:24. Your dominion will spread from the desert to Lebanon and from the Euphrates River to the Mediterranean Sea. Every area that you step into will become a part of you. Exodus 23:31. I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the desert to the Euphrates River, God said to Abraham. Your land will extend from the desert to the Euphrates River. I will hand over to you the people who currently inhabit the land, and you will force them to leave in order to settle the area. Genesis 2:14. The third river is called the Tigris, and it may be found on the eastern side of Ashur, and the Euphrates is the fourth river on the list. Genesis 15:18. On that day, the Lord formed a covenant with Abram and said, To your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates. Abram was a patriarch of the Hebrew people. Isaiah 7:20. On that day, the Lord will use a razor brought from beyond the Euphrates River, which will be the king of Assyria, to shave your heads and private parts, and he will also cut off your beards. Scripture passage, Chronicles 5:9. Due to the fact that their herds had grown in size in Gilead, they were able to expand their territory to the east and settle all the way to the edge of the desert that leads to the Euphrates River. Isaiah 11:15. The Lord will cause the gulf of the Egyptian sea to become dry, and he will sweep his hand across the Euphrates River while a scorching wind is blowing. He will divide it into 7 streams so that people of all ages and abilities can traverse it while wearing sandals. Micah 7:12. On that day, people from Assyria and the towns of Egypt, even from Egypt all the way to the Euphrates, as well as from sea to sea and from mountain to mountain, will come to you. Numbers 22:5 records that messengers were dispatched to find Balaam son of Beor, who was located in Pethor, in his home country close to the Euphrates River. Balak is quoted as having declared, A people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the land and have settled next to me. Revelation 9:14 says, Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. This instruction was given to the 6th angel who held the trumpet. Revelation 16:12 says that the 6th angel poured out his bowl on the large river Euphrates, which caused the river's water to dry up in order to make way for the kings who came from the east. Joshua 1:4. Your domain will reach from the desert all the way up to Lebanon, and it will stretch from the great river Euphrates all the way to the Mediterranean Sea at the westernmost part of the Hittite country. Your wrongdoing will get you in trouble, and your backsliding will bring you condemnation. Consider and realize how horrible and bitter it is for you when you forsake the Lord, your God, and have no awe of me, says the Lord. The Lord Almighty, consider and realize how evil and bitter it is for you. That's all for the video. We will be right back. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel.